Where in the world would 100,000 feel like $1 million? Bolivia. I was staying at a former presidential palace converted into a hostel and decided to see how much a full day with lodging and eating out would run me. It was less than $10. I'll never forget going to the best restaurant in Bolivia, Gusto, for a 3-course lunch with drinks, getting the bill and almost shitting myself when I converted it, and it was $32. Not the outright best meal I've ever had, but by far the best value I've ever had in my life. Bolivia was insanely cool. I lived in rural DRC and had to carry $65,000 cash on me for a consulting project, payment for like hundreds of workers for several months. I did my own PPP calculation based on the price of local goods where I lived, bread etc., and daily wages. My $65K in cash would be around 17 male USD in PPP for the average Congolese where I was working. So, rural Congo. Like deep rural Congo, no Coca-Cola Congo. Damn, did you have a security detail? Surely walking around with such life-changing money to local people could have put you in an extremely dangerous position? No, that would bring way more attention. It was in an envelope at the bottom of my old backpack with other envelopes with papers and contracts. 65K in cash in 100s is not that big of a stack. One other time when I was in Kinshasa, I went to a bank and I sat in a room with other people getting large sums of cash. The man next to me got $1.2 million out in USD. All large transactions are resolved in USD there. It was literally stacked next to me within reaching distance. He worked for car dealership and all transactions are done in cash mostly. He took the cash and put it in a plastic bag, zip-tied it, threw it over his shoulder, and walked out of the building. You never want to look like you're carrying cash. I was in South Sudan a few years before it became South Sudan. We changed money in this open-air market, where people were sitting with tables with stacks of bills of different currencies. When they found out how much we wanted to change, I don't remember how much, we continued the negotiations inside our Land Cruiser. But I was wondering how many guns those guys had to sit outside with so much money like that in a place as violent and destabilized as that. Nepal. It's retirement money there. A guy I know basically did that, living like a monk king. I did 5 weeks in Nepal, one of the most stunning and underrated countries out there. Going there on retirement money sounds like a dream. Yup, beautiful. You have to get over the poverty and pollution in some places. But it is a very good place to at least travel to. That is true, the pollution can be quite bad, especially in Kathmandu. I also volunteered in mountainous communities, so saw a lot of the poverty up close, so I think if I were to live there one day I'd want to help out in that regard. Places like Pokhara, however, felt like a paradise, but it's a place that sees a lot of Western income due to it being the town tourists starting to climb the Annapurna Range and Everest. Saw a lot of old white hippies living their best life out there. How's the healthcare, long-term care for aging retired foreigners? You're gonna die from twisting your ankle on a mountain somewhere, like nature intended. This is the one question I was gonna ask too. $1 million isn't worth much if you're a day's mountainous donkey ride from the next hospital when you have an emergency. And then that hospital doesn't have half the equipment and specialists needed for proper care. 10 years ago I would have said Thailand, but not now. Ain't nothing cheap as balls there anymore. Right. Only the street food remains cheap. I was just there and compared to the US it was very inexpensive. Maybe not what it was, but I spent much less than I spend living here. Vietnam now is what Thailand used to be. If you thought Thailand was cheap, prepare to feel like a king on your next trip to Vietnam. If you feel like a king in Vietnam, you'll feel God tier in Cambodia. Yeah, I was in Siem Reap last year. Their version of Bourbon Street was all $1 drinks. There were a few times eating street food where I literally made money eating there. They would give me a price. I would give them the smallest denomination of their currency I had, 10,000 riel, the equivalent of like $2, and I could see them struggling to figure out how to make change until they just gave me a wad of cash. And in that wad of cash would be the original 10,000 riel note I gave them. When I would go back to explain to them they gave me too much, it was just too much of a language barrier, I guess. Or a cultural thing of not wanting to admit they made a mistake. I don't know. All I know is no matter how hard I tried, they wouldn't take any of the change back. I tried using a translator app, showing them the calculations on my phone, even just trying to leave the extra cash on the food cart. They would chase me down and force it back on me. Great trip, amazing people, but just not good at math. The Bay Area. 100K or $1 million, you still can't buy a house. San Francisco Bay Area is a place where one male feels like 100K. Guatemala. A cup of coffee at local coffee shops was about 12 cents in USD. Guatemala is definitely more expensive than neighboring countries with similar climates. It is true though, you can have 100,000 US dollars and live quite like a king if you do things right. Maybe visit Belize if you want cheaper. Sort of funny because I was in rural Guatemala and wanted a coffee and all they had was instant. Any real coffee is directly funneled to the export stream for hard cash. That's really unfortunate. Rural Guatemala has been exploited for so long. The nature and weather is beautiful. Much higher elevations than I was thinking too. Wherever it is, you would have other problems there. Well yeah, that's the trade-off. You can have a $3 meal, but you can't go to some areas at night. Frankly, that's fine for some folks who prioritize the quality of life over a more modern country. The problem is health care. If you are talking about retirement, it probably won't take long until you get sick. And that's exactly when you don't want to be in those countries. Could really depend on the country. Thailand, for example, does pretty well for healthcare. Same for Turkey depending on the procedure. Like I keep saying, there's trade-offs of course, but if you have flexibility, it's not that bad. Belize. My uncle retired recently and packed up his stuff and moved out there and is loving life. John McAfee loved it too. One of his neighbors who ended up weirdly murdered before McAfee left the country probably did too. Just got back from Vietnam. Would definitely say Vietnam LOL. Got an incredible banh mi and Viet coffee for like $2 to $3 USD total. So many different types of their cuisine is so good and so cheap. Once you travel outside the US, you realize how much money we charge for food versus the entire rest of the world. Even in Europe, food is generally pretty cheap. Now it's possible that that could be due to our local and national rules and regulations. Also, the rest of the world doesn't often tip, so it's really weird. Most places don't put a tax on food. I always thought food was way cheaper when I went on holiday to the US. I'm from the UK. Maybe I wasn't doing your tipping right though. In India, if you have a rental property in the US that nets you around 1K a month, it will be plenty. In a medium-cost city, that turns into 80K a month. With 80K a month, you can afford a decent-sized home, servants to clean and cook you food. I earn a pretty average wage in London, UK, but a girl I was talking to who lives in Peru told me I'd be living a pretty swanky lifestyle with my salary in Lima, even in the affluent areas. So, probably there. Lima is amazing and the food is incredible as well as incredibly cheap compared to where I live. As an example, my wife and I found a grocery store chain that is also in Canada. We went in and saw rotisserie chickens that are normally $12 at home for $2.60 CAD. Restaurants are everywhere, and we would get appies, drinks, and meals we couldn't finish for less than half the price of back home. In Croatia, we recently switched from our native currency to the euro. Consequently, our "Who Wants to Be a Millionaire?" had to also make a switch. Unfortunately for the contestants, the millionaire part is still calculated in our native currency, so now the 15 steps go from 10 euro-150k euro. It's technically 1125000 in our native currency, but it's still ridiculous. Croatia is way too expensive for what you get. $15 cocktails, $10 to $14 burgers, and they're meh. They jack the prices up, and it's still amateurs making subpar products for those amounts. Croatia used to be a great value for the money. Now it's more expensive than Italy, France, Greece, or Spain in most things, and the quality is still meh compared to those countries in terms of history, sites, and food. Bosnia, Montenegro, Albania are still great value in that region. Even Serbia isn't worth it since thousands of wealthy Russians came there at the start of the war. South Africa. I was just on another thread where I saw that guys in the USA pay around $50 for a haircut. It's between $3 to $10 here. I paid just over $6 from a professional barber. I believe Kazakhstan is an underrated country. I recently moved here from Europe, and I've found that living costs are significantly lower than what I experienced back home. The natural scenery is impressive, and there are emerging job opportunities, especially in technology and agriculture. The people here are welcoming, and there's a strong sense of community. Overall, Kazakhstan offers a unique lifestyle with a blend of beauty and affordability that makes it a worthwhile place to live. Bratislava. A group of Americans got the best hotel room in the town for only $1.83 American. Also, I heard that the tip they gave the butler was enough to make him slap his boss and quit. I'm not sure, but my knee-jerk reaction is Costa Rica. My colleague left the USA after Trump was elected in 2016. He withdrew half of his retirement, around $500,000, to buy property and live. He paid the taxes and a 10% penalty. I told him he was insane, and being the economist I am, I did a beautiful spreadsheet on the opportunity cost of pulling that money. Regardless, he left with his wife and his 2 daughters, both under the age of 5. They seem to be living large down there. He has approximately 10 acres of property and a very, very nice home. They bought an older home, tore it down, and rebuilt a new one. The kids seem to be thriving. They speak multiple languages, and they are always outside doing stuff. Looks amazing. He went from teaching at a T3 school in his field to a local college in CR that pays him enough to live comfortably. In which places would $100,000 feel like $1 million? Leave a comment and subscribe to the channel if you want to see more videos like this one.